happen? How did Congress allow this to happen? Well, hey, guess what? That's what government does, right? Like, let's all get surprised that government is going to do bad stuff. Ooh, shocker. I know. That's a real shocker. Now, I know you're not surprised, right? Because you're smart. You're smart and you listen to Hot News Talk Radio, right? Because smart people listen to Hot News Talk Radio. You're well informed. And the reason you're well informed is because you listen to Hot News Talk Radio, right? There's a ton of different ways to listen to Hot News Talk Radio. It's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. We're everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. That's Hot News Talk Radio. We're on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. The show we talk about technology and a lot more. And one of the things that we've been really looking hard at, been taking a long, hard look at, is the NSA, where the NSA, of course, is a national security agency. We found out a lot about the NSA from our good buddy Edward Snowden. And my favorite thing about Edward Snowden is how on all the news reports about him, he's always called former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. So because I'm news director here at Hot News Talk Radio, I run the show, which is Hot News Now, on every weekday here from 5 to 6. I hear that phrase so often. I keep hearing former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. So you get to the point where you can just say former NSA contractor Edward Snowden in your sleep. And actually, I do. That's the funny thing. I was staying over at a friend's house, and he says, man, you were saying the funniest thing. You're asleep on my couch, right? And you go, former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. You're just saying that over and over again. So I will actually, in my sleep, I say former NSA contractor Edward Snowden over and over again. And he woke me up suddenly. I go, former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. So you just get really used to saying former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, because that's always, always, always in any article that's ever about him. For some reason, they always say former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. I don't know why. Everyone knows who he is, but they have to clarify. So in case you don't know who Edward Snowden is, he used to be a contractor working in intelligence security over at the NSA, National Security Agency. I call it the National Insecurity Agency because I'm immature, and it's he used to do analytics. He would study infographics and that sort of thing. Basically, that was his job. So he's former NSA contractor Edward Snowden from now and forevermore. So his job was to study different things, and it turned out that he was a little bit skeeved off by some of the things that he was seeing in the NSA. And he goes, man, these things are not good. The public needs to know. So he got himself a flash drive, no joke, got himself a flash drive and just copied over a bunch of files, left his office, and then sent it over to WikiLeaks. And that was it. Simple as that. So that's part of the reason I call them the National Insecurity Agency, because they really don't know how to even secure themselves. And yet somehow we're supposed to trust them to secure the homeland, right? Like they're part of the Homeland Security Initiative. The NSA has been around for a while, I guess. The NSA you weren't even really supposed to know that the NSA was around until I think the mid-90s is when it was fully declassified. Kind of like the NRO. NRO is one of my favorite things. Let me go off on a tangent here. The NRO is one of my favorite government agencies, not because I like them, but because of how odd they are. Now, the NRO is an agency that most people don't know about. Like if I walk up to your average man on the street and I say, hey, you familiar with the NRO? And they probably don't know. They go, oh, the rap group? I go, no, that's NWA. Good try, though. But NRO is the National Reconnaissance Office. Now, the NRO, their job during the 60s was to launch spy satellites. Now, they've also, from what I've heard, done manned missions as well. And that's where things start to get a little bit weird. Now, it's not really any surprise that there would be other manned missions into space, but it's weird to think about how, we have the Apollo missions, we have the Gemini, however you want to say it. I keep hearing Gemini whenever I listen to the archival tapes, but the Gemini missions, when they had the cool silver spacesuits, those are my favorite, by the way. They had those really neat silver spacesuits. I really love that 70s era spacesuit. But when they had that whole thing going on, and there actually were manned missions, like you don't think about anything other than those missions. So it gets to be really strange when you consider that there actually may have been other manned missions conducted by the United States. That's just sort of a bizarre thing to think about. Well, that's the NRO, and we're talking about the NSA. Completely different thing. The National Reconnaissance Agency, you weren't even supposed to know about it. It was finally declassified thanks to a Freedom of Information Act request in the mid-90s. So nobody even was supposed to know that the National Reconnaissance Office existed until the mid-90s. That's how secretive they are. But they've been around since the 60s. Possibly even before then. Well, the House has voted to reform the NSA surveillance with the USA Freedom Act, according to The Verge. So today, the House of Representatives passed the USA Freedom Act, a measure to end NSA bulk collection of metadata. The bill received broad support in the House with 338 votes for the bill and 88 against, but will now face a tougher road in the Senate. Now, of course, the proper way to go about things would be to allow the Patriot Bill to expire, right? Or excuse me, the Patriot Act would be to allow the Patriot Act to expire, because it's not very patriotic, for one. I mean, it's not patriotic at all. And it's also kind of illegal. That's the funny thing as well. It's actually illegal. The Patriot Act is not constitutional and is thus void. That's the funny thing. If a bill is unconstitutional, it doesn't count. It's not legal. Like, this does not count as legal. You don't have to abide by it. So whenever you hear about, there's an illegal search, well, that's not, that was not binding. They can't use any information from that. It's an unconstitutional search. So the Patriot Act allows for a lot of unconstitutional activity and is thus in and of itself unconstitutional. You can't use any provision that's in the Patriot Act because it's not legal. Now, people are going to come to the defense of the Patriot Act. People are going to leap to the defense of the Patriot Act. People such as our good buddy, whose name I just forgot, not Lindsey Graham, although he probably has, but the Senate Majority Leader, whose name totally escapes me, Mitch McConnell. Excuse me. Mitch McConnell is going to jump to the defense of the Patriot Act and to NSA surveillance, which was just ruled to be illegal, by the way. So he's already arguing for something that's illegal. That's the weird thing. You have people who are now arguing for illegal surveillance. It's not just that it's illegal in the sense that it's unconstitutional, which is good enough for me, but it's also illegal in the sense that a federal court has deemed it to be. So by their own system standards, this is an illegal operation, and yet people are still defending it. Why are you defending something that's unlawful? Because they're anarchists. No, I'm not joking. They actually are. Think about it. People talk about all the time, they talk about rule of law, right? That's people's favorite thing to talk about is rule of law, especially conservative radio show hosts, I notice, or I should say neocon radio show hosts. They love to talk about rule of law. You're not respecting rule of law. Like, well, no kidding, because they don't care. That's the funny thing. Now, I'm not saying this to be inflammatory and to make people afraid, because that's just silly. That's the wrong answer. It's not worth it to be afraid. It's more a point and laugh sort of thing, where these guys are just so dumb. They don't know what they're doing. So point and laugh. That's my solution, is point and laugh. And it's just so funny to me how people will talk about rule of law all the time. Even people who are criminals talk about rule of law. I'm talking about politicians. They talk about rule of law. These people need to respect rule of law because we're lawmakers and we're passing laws, and you're not respecting rule of law. Well, no kidding, because the people who pass the laws don't even respect rule of law. Because now you have people who are arguing for something which is blatantly illegal, like the Patriot Act, which is blatantly illegal, like what we have with the NSA surveillance. And they're arguing for that. So that in and of itself, you'd think would be enough evidence to say, well, these people don't actually care about rule of law. The politicians, the lawmakers do not respect rule of law. And to drop a name, if you want me to do that, Mitch McConnell obviously does not actually respect rule of law. It's that simple. It's that easy. How can this not be recognized? These guys are talking about the system which is blatantly illegal. This is a crime. It's not just that, well, this shouldn't be done. It's that it's actually a crime. Like, dead simple. It's a crime. I'm not sure how one could argue possibly for this NSA surveillance when it's just like, it's right there on the books as illegal and a crime. Well, the vote's timing was no coincidence. On June the 1st, the NSA's authority to obtain phone metadata granted by Section 215 of the Patriot Act will expire. Rather than granting a full renewal of that authority, the Freedom Act keeps the metadata in the hands of telecoms, who can search for the information after receiving a court order that specifies information like a person or account. The bill also takes transparency measures, giving telecoms more options to publicly report on national security requests. Now, something that has to also be kept in mind is that metadata is automatically generated. What I mean by that is, when I make a phone call, and it's dead simple to make a phone call nowadays. You have a cell phone in your hand. I have one in my hand right now. I can make a phone call to anywhere on the North American continent for free, essentially. Well, no added rate. I'll put it that way. I can make a phone call to anywhere on the North American continent at no added charge to my $20 a month bill. So it's actually really cheap for me to call anywhere North American continent and India, I believe, and some other. I believe I can also call the UK without any added charges. I don't know why I want to, but I could. So without any added charges. Now, every time a phone call is made, metadata is created. Now, metadata, I think about the word meta, right? META. Let me actually, I'll help you out here because I need to help myself. And we'll Google what does meta mean? META definition. Okay, so we'll find out what does meta mean. Short for meta key of creative work, referring to itself or the conventions of its genre, self-referential. Okay, so this means that metadata is data pertaining to the main packet. We'll put it that way. So the best way to describe that is on iTunes or on the Google Play Store. When you download a track, you download a song, and you've downloaded that song. Now you have the song itself, which is ones and zeros that are converted into analog sound through your headphones. But to put it just blatant, to put it blunt, you are downloading a song, right? Now there's stuff that pertains to that song, like track name, album name, artist name, duration, how many times you've played it, how many stars you've given it, the ID3 tag, all that stuff. That's the metadata. Okay, so when you make a phone call, the same stuff is created. You make a phone call, and the duration of that phone call upon termination of phone call is created, and the destination of that phone call is created, and the destination, or rather the send location, that's your location, is also sent to the telecom, and duration of call, all sorts of different referential factors are put into play. So, I mean, this is not wrong in and of itself. The creation of metadata for a phone call is not wrong. It's actually necessary for the system to continue, for troubleshooting, for whatever. So metadata creation by your cell phone is not wrong in and of itself. That's just part of the process. That's just how the protocol works. That's how GSM works. So that's fine. Now, what the NSA does is they take that information and they just sweep it up. Now, for what purpose, you might be asking? Well, they claim that it's for counterterrorism purposes, right? Oh, counterterrorism. That's always the kicker, is the counterterrorism. Like, man, we need to make sure that people stay in line. How can we make sure that people are kind of afraid to use their phones to exercise freedom of speech? Well, we'll monitor everyone's phones and call it counterterrorism. So you can use counterterrorism or national security to get away with literal murder. I mean, it has been done. They have killed American citizens overseas without due process, without trial, because they labeled them as enemy combatants. And they say it's for national security, so they get away with it. It's easy to get away with. By they, I mean, of course, the federal government or the military-industrial complex, whatever terminology you want to use. So this may sound now like a crazed raving of some anti-government nut. Well, I'm not really an anti-government nut. I am a nut, but I'm not necessarily anti-government. I'm not against government. I'm against this government. There has to be a distinction that's made. This government is, and most governments are, immoral because it's backed by force. You have to understand, it's backed by force. Now, how do you illustrate that? Let's put it this way. And there's a great series of videos, by the way, on YouTube, which wonderfully illustrate the immorality of state systems. But we'll give you this example that's given in this video. So I'm totally stealing this idea, this analogy, but we'll put it this way. The analogy is you and your friend are standing right next to each other and you're just hanging out. Okay, an old friend of yours who you both know, mutual friend, walks up and he says, I've run out of money. I need help. My kid's going to college. I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. So you say, okay, man, I'll help you out. You give him a few $100. And you're sort of expecting your friend to give him a few $100 too, but he doesn't. He just stands there. Now, we don't know why he just stood there, right? That doesn't really matter. What matters is that he did not pay. Now, is he wrong in not paying? It could be that he actually can't afford to pay. Your friend might not actually be able to afford to help this guy out. He may want to, but he can't because he doesn't have money. I've been in that situation before. Maybe you've been in that situation before. I know plenty of people who have. There's no shame in not having money, right? I mean, there's a lot of circumstances where you don't have money, and it's fine to not, right? I mean, we've all been there, right? So it's not that him not paying is necessarily immoral, but you're thinking, come on, give the guy some cash, right? So you get kind of mad. You ball your fist. You're like, oh, man, I wish he would just pay. Well, he didn't. So would you be okay with punching his lights out in order to force money out of him? Well, no, you wouldn't. But you would be in favor of an enforcement system where a portion of his paycheck is given up every month, right? You would say that that's his fair share. But how does that fair share obtained? You see, every time there's any sort of bill collection, put it that way, anytime there's any sort of revenue collection, of revenue generation, There's always force behind it. There has to be. Now, I don't mean in terms of a friendly transaction at a dollar store. That's fine. That's perfectly moral. That should happen. That's local economy. That's good. A-okay. What I'm talking about is the forcible transaction, where it's not really a transaction because you're not really consenting to it. What I'm talking about is when the state collects its money, it has to do it backed by force, meaning every social program that ever happens in this country, in any country, this is not a jab specifically at the United States. This is a jab at the system in general, right? The system of revenue collection, where it has to be backed by force. It must be. That's how the system is set up, where if you don't pay, eventually you'll get another bill, which is for a higher amount, for a penalty for not paying the previous one. Then you'll get another one. Then you'll get another one. Then you'll get another one. Eventually, people break in your house and pull you away and take you to jail, you see. Now, if you try to defend yourself, say you have a firearm in your house and you say, they're not going to take me. I have a wife and kids. I can't afford to pay this. They're not going to take me. So you pull out your firearm and you're readying yourself at the door. And they come in through your door and you start firing at them. That, I would argue, is justified. They're trying to steal what's yours. They're trying to take you away from your family. This shooting is justified. The system doesn't back that, though. So now you either get shot and killed or you get sent off to jail for a very long time. What's happened to your family now? That's the system that's backed by force. That's immoral. Every single social program relies on that threat of force. Now, you may say that, well, this is necessary for a society. I don't know. How has society operated before we had the tax systems that we have now? It seems like it operated just fine. I'll think about immediately post-colonial America, where there was no threat of people breaking down your door to take your money so that you can support social programs. I'm pretty sure George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and such would not be hugely in favor of social programs in the way that we have them now. They would say, well, businesses can start up social programs. There can be social charities that are voluntary. There's all sorts of voluntary ways to go about these things. Like, for instance, there's a story I was reading not too long ago about free ebooks being given out to kids. Now, that in and of itself, you can't really argue with. The effects of free ebooks given to kids, I'm sure, is great, and they read books and they're educated and it's wonderful. But where does that come from? It came from a federal program or a state program or something else. Now, free ebooks could easily be given out by Amazon. I'm sure Amazon would love to set up a program. The folks at Amazon would love to set up a program, Jeff Bezos or whatever, to set up a program where kids get even free Kindles and they get free ebooks. There's probably somebody out there who wants to do that. But he's not going to, because he figures, well, there's a welfare program for that anyway. There's already a state program for that anyway. So you see how the state stifles charity. The state actually stifles growth. It's funny how that works. And if you don't comply, now you're called domestic terrorist. If you don't comply, you're not paying your fair share or what have you. You see, that's the unfortunate system that we have. And people will say it's a necessary evil. There's no such thing as a necessary evil. If it's evil, it's not necessary. I would love to hear somebody tell me how this is a necessary evil. How could anyone possibly say that backing a system of programs which not everyone consents to by force is a necessary evil? Because it's not. It's really not. Well, if you somehow come up with some way this is a necessary evil, give me a call, 423-800-8141. That's 423-800-8141. And I'd love to hear what you could ever possibly have to say for how that's a necessary evil. Well, Automax is a car lot. Well, there's top quality used cars that are $2,000 or less than other lots. Unpretentious little car lot just past, actually east of Central High on Highway 58. Low overhead, no staff. He does it all himself. Passes the savings on to you. Everyone could get a car and rebuild credit at Automax. It's Automax, 643-2886. Ask for Louis. That's Automax 643-2886, and ask for Louis. Tell them that the folks over at Hot News Talk Radio sent you. And Bruce Cribbs at the Entrepreneur Source will get you a franchise that's suitable to your background, your interests, your capital availability, and it'll put you in our local economy. So now you can be a local economy player and get out of the national system. That's Bruce Krebs at the Entrepreneur Source. Call 875-5621. That's the Entrepreneur Source, 875-5621. If you want to be a local economy player, this is a great way to kickstart your way into local economy so you can get out of the national system, because the national system isn't really sustainable. Even on mainstream news now, they're talking about how there's the potential collapse of the economic system. Like, it's inevitable. Now, you and I knew that, but now we know it's really going to happen if mainstream news is finally talking about it. They're talking about the inevitable collapse of the financial systems. I don't see that as a bad thing because this is a chance now for local economy to flourish without the imposition of a federal system. So get involved in local economy.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio. I'm Chris Foster. There are passengers unaccounted for from Tuesday's train derailment in Philadelphia. At least 7 died, and federal investigators have not yet spoken to the engineer, Brandon Bastian.
His attorney says Bastian gave investigators blood samples at the hospital where he was treated for injuries, including a concussion, and says Bastian turned over his cell phone and wasn't talking or texting before the crash. His attorney says drugs and alcohol were not involved, but also says his client doesn't remember much and doesn't say why he was doing 106 miles per hour, more than double the speed limit when he hit the curve in the tracks.
Fox's Rick Leventhal. Senate Democrats agree to unblock a trade bill.
It sets up an initial vote this afternoon on a plan to give President Obama fast-track authority to hammer out a Pacific trade deal that's largely supported by business groups and Republicans and largely opposed by labor unions and Democrats.
Fox News Radio's Jared Halpern. Fox News, we report. You decide.
So the NSA programs are not really going to be stopped, unfortunately. The House has voted to reform the NSA surveillance with the USA Freedom Act, which isn't actually going to do anything. The Verge is carrying the story about today. In the House of Representatives, they passed the USA Freedom Act, which was a measure to end the NSA's bulk collection of metadata. The bill received broad support in the House with 338 votes for the bill and 88 against, but will now face a tougher road in the Senate. Now, here's something that's interesting about this. On the face of it, it seems like NSA bulk collection has ceased. But think about how people read the news. No, really, think about how people read the news. Most people nowadays get their news from Facebook and Twitter. Okay, they get the news from social media, and then sometimes they'll watch cable TV. And of course, you listen to the radio, and that's the best way to get news. But no, I'm not even kidding. That really is one of the best ways to get news. I do it myself. But people will often just check out a headline. So the headline is House votes to reform NSA surveillance with USA Freedom Act. So because that's mostly what people are going to see, they're not actually going to read the article. They're just going to see the headline, which is, House votes to reform NSA surveillance with USA Freedom Act. That's what people are going to see in the headlines, and they're going to think, well, NSA surveillance is over, except it's not. So because of that headline, people are going to think that it's, NSA surveillance is over and we don't have anything to worry about. So the whole controversy is essentially killed because of the headline, where people only read the headlines. They never read between the lines. They always read the headlines. It's funny how that works out. Now, I have to be more discerning than that due to my job here as news director at Hot News Talk Radio, where I do Hot News Now every weekday at 5 to 7 right here, 5 to 6 right here on Hot News Talk Radio. I'm the news director, so I have to be a little bit more discerning with how I handle the news. I have to read all the articles. I have to read the headlines and the articles, which is more than a lot of people do. Now, there are some benefits to that where people can be reasonably well informed just in the space of a few seconds. You read a headline, you go, okay, so I know that's done. But most people don't actually read that headline. So we have the situation now where people read a headline and think that the problem is over when in fact it's not. It's not even close to over. In fact, now we have new problems to add on to everything. And something else I noticed about people who only read the headlines, they don't want to know things. And that's something that's very disturbing to me. Now, I don't mean they don't want to be informed, although sometimes they do. What I'm talking about is when we talk about government abuse, right? When we talk about government abusing its power, often, I mean very often, these people won't want to know things. Like, they do not want to know how deep the corruption goes. They don't want to know how bad it is. And that's very strange to me. Now, I want to know as much as I possibly can. I want to know everything. I don't mean to say I don't want to be a super intelligent person who knows everything and is better than everybody else. I just mean I want to be well informed. And I want you to be well informed. That's why I do these shows. Other people, not so much. And that's really weird to me, where we have this sort of epidemic of people who just don't want to know. It gets to the point where people are just so fed up. They're like, I don't even want to know what happens anymore. I see people posting on Facebook, or not on Facebook, pardon me. I saw somebody posting in the YouTube comment section, which I know is not the place to get the most intellectual discourse, but somebody posted in the YouTube comment section a video about the NRO, actually. And they said, there are just some things we don't need to know. Like, no, that's actually no. There are some things that we definitely do need to know. And government programs to put people in space, I think, would definitely be one of them. And a government program to spy on people would absolutely be something that we need to know about. But unfortunately, there are people out there who have this mindset where the government can do nothing wrong. And if they do some dark operation, it's always for the greater good. And these ideas are very much propagated by movies and media in general, of course. You have movies like Zero Dark 30, where it seems like, the operation to get bin Laden was totally messed up, but justified. It's always justified, whatever happens. And that's very rarely, in fact, almost never, in my estimation, the case where these operations are truly justified in their ends. We have such a pragmatic society. And in fact, I hear even a radio show host talk about how pragmatism is actually okay, where the ends justify the means. Well, that's very rarely the case. You have to think about repercussions. You have to think about how the world works. You can't just say, we're going to blow up a village and it killed 2 Al-Qaeda militants, thus it's okay. The ends do not justify the means. You've killed 2 Al-Qaeda militants. Okay, cool. Think about how deeper this goes, though. Okay, you've killed 2 Al-Qaeda militants, but you've also killed, say, 1 civilian, and he's an uncle to several kids. Now, these kids hear about this, and they say, my uncle just died in a U.S. government drone strike. I hate the U.S. government now, and I'm going to do my best to avenge him. You see, now you've created another problem where you're going to have 20 years from now or 10 years from now, 2 more Al-Qaeda militants, and it's going to spread out from there. You see how the problem arises? It's not a problem where we just need to blow more people up. You're trying to fix the problem with a hammer and everything's a nail. And that's not the solution to things. It seems that the solution to things is very often much more local. The solution to things is very often much more diplomatic than just blowing everything up, because it really doesn't work that way. If you keep, it's sort of like a game of whack-a-mole. Except every time you whack one of the moles, 3 more pop up. And that's not the way to solve any of our problems here, where people just want to have the simplest solution possible. And very often the solution is not as simple as that, where we just keep bashing on it, say, well, we need to just fix this problem. If we just keep hitting it, maybe it'll work right. So your car doesn't work, and you don't really know a whole lot about mechanics. So you keep bashing on the hood of your car with a wrench, hoping that it'll start up this time. And it doesn't work that way. Well, the same thing is happening with NSA surveillance, where the problem isn't that it's that the NSA is spying on us. The problem is that the NSA exists, period. They're not a legal entity. I mean, they do not exist legally. Anyone who works for the federal government and works in the NSA, their job is basically null because it's not legal. They're not legally employed. It's the same as being employed by the mafia. That's not legal. It's not a legal form of employment. That's what's happening here. You work for the Department of Homeland Security. Sorry, you don't work for a legal entity. You work for the FBI. I'm sorry, you don't work for a legal entity. You work for the CIA. Sorry, you don't work for a legal entity. All these things are illegal. They're not allowed. It's unconstitutional. You work for the police. You don't work for a legal entity. It's not allowed in the Constitution. It's as simple as that. Now, sheriffs, on the other hand, do. A sheriff's deputy, you are working for a legal entity because the sheriffs are allowed for with the common law, which is a higher form of law than statute and such. So you are working for a legal entity if you're a sheriff's deputy. You are lawfully employed and hopefully gainfully employed. But if you're a sheriff's, or sorry, not a sheriff's deputy, but a police officer, it's not the same story. This is not a legal job. It's unconstitutional. It's not legal. So it's as simple as that. And people often don't want to face the facts where all these different entities that we've lived with for so long are just simply illegal. They don't want to face the music and say, well, maybe we should start purging all these different agencies. Instead, they say that, well, this is a necessary evil. No such thing. No such thing as a necessary evil. If it's evil, it's not necessary. Simple as that. The vote and the timing of the vote for the USA Freedom Act was no coincidence. On June the 1st, the NSA's authority to obtain phone metadata, which is granted by Section 215 of the Patriot Act, will expire. Rather than granting a full renewal of that authority, the Freedom Act keeps that metadata in the hands of telecoms who can search for the information after receiving a court order that specifies information like a person or account. The bill also takes transparency measures, giving telecoms more options to publicly report on national security requests. The bill is meant to bridge the divide between Democrats hoping to fully end the NSA's power and Republicans hoping for a full renewal under the Patriot Act Section 215. The president has also thrown his support behind the bill. So the tables have turned sort of in the political spectrum, where Republicans are backing the president is actually backing Republicans. Now, this illustrates something which I've been talking about for forever, and that's not to toot my own horn, because a lot of people have. I'm certainly not the only one. But this is something that perhaps I don't want to say the people at large, but this is something that is not publicized in cable news. You're never going to see this on cable news. But the problem is that both parties are almost identical. There's not really a whole lot of difference between the two parties. We have the Republicans now who are advocating for something which is actually illegal. It is actually a crime to support, I would say. If you are in Congress, you're in the Senate, you're supporting something which goes directly against the people of the United States, you're actually committing an act of treason now. So these people are not legally in Congress anymore. I mean, there's so many different examples where people are not actually legally in Congress. That's the funny thing. These people should actually be tried for treason. It's kind of funny how that works out, but that's not going to happen. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm saying that if you are supporting and voting for a bill which is going directly against the interests of the United States of America, or to put it better, it's going against the interests of the people, and it actually is going against the people directly, is spying on them, is infringing upon their rights, then why the heck are you still in office? Why hasn't somebody arrested you? Well, it's because there's never going to be enforcement. And that's kind of the problem too with this NSA bill, where the ruling on the appeals court, where they determined that in fact the NSA metadata collection was illegal. Well, who's going to enforce that is the question. I mean, who's going to be penalized for committing this illegal act? Well, really nobody. I mean, think about it. Is somebody from the CIA going to walk in and go, hey, you guys are under arrest? Well, wouldn't be the CIA, of course, but somebody from the FBI walks in and says, you're all under arrest for illegal activity. Well, that's not going to happen. You're all under arrest for violation of the Fourth Amendment. Nobody's going to do that. If they did, they'd be treated as a rogue agent, and they themselves would be thrown in jail most likely. So we're not going to be seeing any cases of that happening, unfortunately. It's unfortunate that we're not going to be seeing any enforcement of the law. So that's where the government doesn't actually believe in rule of law, because they believe in rule of law so long as it's working against the people. But as soon as it's working against the government, suddenly rule of law doesn't count anymore because of national security, because of special exception. You see, that's the problem, where there's this climate of anarchy that exists very obviously within the United States government, and within most governments, I would say as well, where it's this system of anarchy where rule of law doesn't really apply to them, but it does definitely apply to the people. So long as rule of law is working against the people and is directly oppressing the people, then it's okay. But as soon as rule of law starts working against a senator or working against a federal agency, they say that, well, that's not okay because we need to protect American interests. You know, American interests very often are actually not, believe it or not, spying against your average American, because that's not really working in the best interests of the people. Kind of hard to imagine, I know. Well, civil rights groups like the Electronic Frontier Foundation have declined to support this new bill, the USA Freedom Act, arguing that it does not go far enough to stop NSA spying. Meanwhile, high-ranking Senate Republicans, including Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, have publicly denounced the bill, with some hoping instead to pass a so-called clean renewal of the Patriot Act. While the House is expected to approve the bill, its chances for survival in the Senate are much less clear. So Mitch McConnell, who is the majority leader in the Senate, supports a illegal entity, the NSA. Now that's a little bit weird, isn't it? So the NSA program, which you would think is just blatantly illegal and nobody would ever support, is being supported by a very prominent politician, a very prominent Republican. So the House, according to USA Today, is poised to pass legislation on Wednesday, today, that would end, or rather yesterday, that would end the National Security Agency's controversial mass collection of phone data from millions of Americans not suspected of any terrorist activity. Well, the majority of House members appear ready to approve the bipartisan USA Freedom Act. However, notice Mitch McConnell. It's not clear if Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will allow a vote. He's introduced his own bill to renew the Patriot Act as it is through the year 2020, saying that Congress should not do anything to weaken the government's ability to gather intelligence against terrorist groups. He says the nation is better off with an extension of the Patriot Act than not, McConnell said in a speech on Sunday in Boston. He called Section 215 an important tool to prevent the next terrorist attack. It's that language that makes people think, well, if it's going to prevent the next terrorist attack, then I guess it's A-okay. Well, they're not understanding a very common principle, a very basic principle, which is something that our good buddy Benjamin Franklin pointed out, which is those who would sacrifice liberty for security deserve neither. And this is exactly asking for that to happen. This is precisely asking for that to happen. And why am I harping on the NSA so much? It's an extremely important thing, because it does affect all of us. This is not just some silly federal thing that doesn't really affect us, and there's not really a whole lot we can do about it. Well, it might be true that there's not a whole lot we can do about it, but being informed is extremely important when we're talking about these things, because you have to know that the government systems, as they are now, are directly opposed to the interests of the people. Directly. They do not conform with the interests of the people. They conform with the interests of crony capitalism, certainly, but they certainly don't go with free markets. Now, people in Congress will talk all day about how we have a great free market here in the United States. We do, but it's not mainstream. If we had a true free market here in the United States, we wouldn't have many of the things that we have today. There wouldn't be something like, well, actually Amtrak, because it's not a free market entity. It gets government subsidy and is thus not free market. If we had a true free market, GM would be bankrupt right now and probably wouldn't exist, you see, because a free market wouldn't allow for a business to get government money. And that's what happened with the GM bailout. You see, there was this program, Cash for Clunkers and all these different things to help to subsidize an American business, which they determined had to stay afloat, even though the free market demanded that this business not stay afloat, you see. People don't want GM cars, so GM should go out of business. But obviously, if GM is going bankrupt, so be it. That would be the free market mentality. But for some reason, we have to prop this up with government money. You see, that's controlled capitalism. That's possibly even dipping your toe into the waters of socialism as well, although I wouldn't quite go that far. It is definitely controlled capitalism, which is not free market. Even people who claim to be free market apologists don't seem to understand this idea. Even people who say that we have this wonderful free market here in the United States will actually support different social programs that could easily be filled in with a free market system. And it's really funny to me how people will constantly talk about the free market, but they don't actually support the free market. Okay, for instance, you couldn't possibly be a supporter of the free market and also support public schooling, government schooling. You couldn't possibly. There's no way, because this is now a government doing what either A, a family should do, B, a church should do, or C, a business should do, or all three of those alternatively and ideally, you see. So it's a free market would allow for there to be a private school. The free market would allow for there to be a church school. The free market would allow for there to be homeschooling, as I was. But a public school that's subsidized by a government, no. So people go all up in arms and they say, what about the teachers? What about the teachers? The teachers have to have jobs. Well, sure, of course they do. The teachers do need to have jobs, but they can certainly be employed by a private institution, not by a government institution. After all, we keep seeing teachers unions who are unhappy with all the different wages and how they can't afford to buy lunch and everything. Well, it's no wonder. The government is not set up to be a proper business partner. The government is not very good at running business. The government is the worst CEO of all time who keeps somehow getting more money. And that's what's exactly happening. That's why I'm a very strong supporter of a free market and not a very strong supporter of government. The less government, the better. In fact, possibly no state would be the best state. But that's going very extreme, and almost nobody supports that idea. Somebody who's much, much better at arguing for free market than I am is David Toulis of Nuganomics.com, and his show is Nuganomics right here on Hot News Talk Radio. He's coming up in actually about 20 or so minutes right here on Hot News Talk Radio, where he talks about the local economy, free markets, a very Nuga-centric view. His show is a wonderful, wonderful show here on Hot News Talk Radio, where he's constantly propping free market, is constantly helping out small business people by having them in the studio and interviewing them. You can't go wrong with Nuganomics.com with David Toulis right here on Hot News Talk Radio. Something funny I was reading about the other day is this really, really interesting article I was reading about the FBI and DEF CON. Now, DEF CON is a hacker conference that I actually have a friend, a very good friend of mine, who went to DEF CON. And he had a lot of fun. He bought some stuff, got some cool merchandise, some cool swag. That's actual proper usage of the word swag. He got some really neat stuff that he took home with him, some merchandise, some loot, some booty. Well, the FBI found out about DEF CON's contest that they hold every year. And this particular contest is particularly controversial. You see, DEF CON every year has a Spot the Fed contest. So it's no secret that federal agents are regular attendees of hacking conferences. Now, the DEF CON hacker conference is particularly funny because they will invite, very prominent hackers to speak at their particular conference, which is DEF CON. So the FBI found out about DEF CON's Spot the Fed contest, and they got very mad. They got very upset about the Spot the Fed contest, which is you get a free t-shirt if you point out somebody who is a Fed. So what happens is you point at somebody and you alert a staff member of the conference, I think this guy's a Fed. So then they stop everything and a vote is held with people who are in the area. Raise your hand if you think this guy's a Fed, and then people will raise their hands. And then they can ask the guy, are you actually? And it doesn't matter if he says yes or no, but if he says yes, you thumbs up, you actually got one. But if by common vote is determined that he is a Fed, you get a free t-shirt, and he also does that says, I am a Fed. So you get a free t-shirt that says, I spotted the Fed, and he gets one that says, I am a Fed. And there actually is a system also where people who are actual Feds can go to the leader of the conference and can ask for a Spot I am a Fed t-shirt, and he'll give you one as well. So if you are an FBI agent, you go to the DEF CON hacker conference out in Las Vegas, you can get a Spot the Fed t-shirt as well. So in 2013, the writer of this article went to DEF CON. He says he spotted a guy holding a big cardboard sign that said in huge letters, free high fives for undercover Feds. He says, while I was trying to take a picture of him, a couple of attendees high-fived him. Of course, there's no way to know whether or not they were really Feds or they were just doing it for fun. If you're wondering, he says, yes, I also spotted a Fed, but I can't talk about it. So back in 2000, not everyone at the FBI was aware of the tongue-in-cheek game. In a document released last week by Muckrock, who's an agent with the FBI's Las Vegas squad, explained what DEF CON is and added that something of interest to all personnel attending the conference should be the Spot the Fed contest. Now, the FBI has zero sense of humor. Attendees at DEF CON, it says, appear to pride themselves on their ability to spot federal law enforcement officers wearing a t-shirt if they do so, the agent matter-of-factly wrote. The agent, who admitted that he found all the information by Googling it and downloaded a bunch of papers from the official conference website, also noted that there is growing interest in the conference, not just from the FBI, but also from hackers. And again, I know a guy who went to DEF CON. I wanted to go as well. For that reason, It can be expected that numerous subjects of interest may attend this conference, the unnamed agent concluded. The agent, in the interest of thoroughness, also attached web pages from DEF CON's website that describe the 7th annual Spot the Fed contest. Unfortunately, despite the fact that the FBI disclosed 131 pages in response to the Freedom of Information Act request, which basically asked for any materials related to DEF CON since the conference first edition, there's practically nothing else worth noting in those documents. Some information is, of course, redacted. Some of it's just plain boring routine. If you are curious, you can read the information on motherboard.vice.com, where they have an article, a really funny article about the headline is When the FBI Found Out About DEF CON Spot the Fed contest. But you see, this is the solution to the problem, where it's very funny. You know, it's very tongue-in-cheek. It's humorous. And that's totally against everything that the Feds stand for. The Feds are so mechanized, so barcode, man. And they're all just about, you know, constantly this machinery system that has no sense of humor. Local economy has a wonderful sense of humor. I'm starting to find more often than not. Or a franchise really doesn't have a very good sense of humor. But local economy guys, they'll joke around with you when you're in their store. They're fun guys. Local economy players tend to be very fun, very personable, and national not so much. The Feds have zero sense of humor. So probably the best way to defeat the federal system is with jokes. And that's why I say point and laugh. That's probably one of the best solutions, is to point and laugh, because they don't understand jokes. They don't understand humor. It does not compute. They don't know what to do. So the solution, of course, is local economy, and the solution is to just point and laugh, because they're going to collapse anyway. I mean, think about it. Somebody who has no sense of humor is not going to make it very far. And that's what's happening here. Think of the FBI as this guy who's at school who's really awkward and doesn't really know much about social interactions, but he has all the dirt on everybody, so everyone's sort of wary of him. But if everyone just embraces their quirks and starts to laugh at him, he'll eventually leave them alone. And that's what's happening with the FBI. Just point and laugh, man, because they don't have a sense of humor. They don't understand humor. It's one of those things where, kind of like how androids can identify optical illusions, like in the game Snatcher. That's exactly what's happening with the FBI. They can't understand sense of humor. That's the solution. Not to be aggressive and violent and obnoxious. It's just to make fun. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. The show we talk about technology and more. Nuganomics.com with David Toulis is coming up in just a few seconds right here on HotNewsTalkRadio.com and Hot News Talk Radio on AM 1240. You can get the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. You can listen to us that way. Search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Don't forget to save half off. Go to Hot News Talk Radio. Click on the half off link for great deals. Hot News Talk Radio saves you money. This is, of course, Hot News Talk Radio and HotNewsTalkRadio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is a mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Surgery does not have to be financially painful. Hi, I'm Surgical Dr. David Red, and I'd like to invite you to my walk-in surgery clinic in North Shore. Quick Surge brings you immediate relief from moles, skin tags, maybe a laceration. Quick Surge. You walk in, fill out a mini form, I numb the area I'll treat, and before you know it, you're on your way home. Do I take insurance? No, because I take cash customers. I have super low and fixed prices. Credit card, check, or cash. Uninsured? Member of the working financially disadvantaged? Choose Quick Surge. I publish prices online. No murk, just sunshine. Hassle-free, pain-free. Love the idea of a personal relationship with a doctor? Drop in with a nasty cut from work. Quick Surge. I'll take care of you. Quick Surge in the Public Center on the North Shore. No insurance hassles with Quick Surge. The national medical system is dysfunctional, overpriced, very alienating. I'm part of the solution, and so are you. Come on home. QuickSurge.com. QUIKSURG. Relief.
When my brother and I opened the first Jets Pizza, we believed if we made the best pizza, customers would find us. So we made fresh dough each day, used fresh toppings, and premium mozzarella cheese. 300 plus stores later, we still do.
Try Jet's famous 8-corner pizza with premium mozzarella cheese and one topping, now just $11.99 for a limited time only. Jet's Pizza, the best pizza in town. 3600 Hickson Pike.
Life is short. Eat better pizza.
Let's get Jets.
You do not have to be living with constant pain. You need to make the choice today to enjoy a revitalized body. You deserve to live a better pain-free life. And Dr. Ross can help. At Ross Chiropractic, failure is not an option. For over 40 years, Dr. Ross, a graduate of the prestigious Palmer College of Chiropractic, prided himself in helping and healing. The Ross method of chiropractic care is unique in developing a treatment designed just for you. And Ross Chiropractic makes this promise to you. If he believes that he can help relieve your pain, he will guide you to another health practitioner to assist you. Feel better now. You owe it to yourself. You really do. Call Dr. Ross now at 954-9591. That's 954-9591. And visit Dr. Ross at 7405 Shaliford Road, Suite 320. Ross Chiropractic, helping your body heal itself. Because when your spine's in line, you will feel fine. Call 954-9591. That's 954-9591 for Ross Chiropractic.
We've got a table here at Delia's and Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican